Hi, Carla.
Hi, Kimmy. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good, pretty good. Yeah.
Good.
Gorgeous out there today.
It really is. It's so nice that the humidity's gone.
Yep. Good. So you just have the one little one still?
I do. Yep, she is almost 2.5. She'll be 2.5 in September. So
Okay.
yeah, she's a lot of fun.
Nice. That's exciting. And then
Yeah,
everybody always asks, well, right?
right.
Yeah. This is a great position to have in real estate for you while they're little.
It really is. It worked out so well. I mean, yeah, when I took the job, like Jordan and I were kind of talking about starting to try. So I'm like, this might be a good time to shift gears a little bit. And yeah, I'm so thankful I did because I don't know, just the hustle and bustle of selling and the unknown hours,
Yep.
all that just makes it a little crazy. So,
Yeah, it does. And you know
yeah.
what? You can sleep at 11 p.m. instead of,
Right. Yeah.
having surprises. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, real estate, it's still 24 hours, but it's a little more different in this role. Like it's not
Yeah.
as, yeah.
And I would imagine, how many transactions are you seeing a month right
Oh my
now?
gosh. Hundreds.
Well, that's good because we want
Yeah.
them, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's yeah, a lot of transactions
There's
come through.
a point where if you reach a certain number, it's more than a person's capable of.
Yeah, I think there is some metric that the like Charlie and Mandy, they're kind of they're watching and
Uh-huh.
so we'll be
Yep.
good.
And then now as the TOSA office continues to grow,
Yep, exactly. They'll need to have a person out there just like Lake Country has now, and yeah,
yeah. And how many agents at Lake Country now?
I think we're about 60.
Okay, because that's Steph Conrad, correct?
Yep, Connor. Yep,
Connor.
yep,
Okay.
yeah.
Neat.
So yeah, it's
Might be me and
exciting.
you so far.
I think we've got a few people. It looks like Teresa's joined us, Adriana. So
Nice.
yeah, I will go ahead and get started. So today we're talking about advertising and lead gen with compliance. And then I'm also going to be talking about MLS rules and things to be thinking about with regards to MLS and making sure you don't get fined. And stop me at any time if you have any questions. So as far as advertising goes, there is a general real estate advertising rule in the state of Wisconsin. There's 4 cardinal rules that all licensees must follow when engaging in any advertising, whether it's written, verbal, or electronic. First is that advertising cannot be false, deceptive, or misleading. The advertising must include the firm name. The property may be advertised only with a signed listing contract, and the owner must agree on an advertised price. So I would say the biggest thing is you can't advertise unless you have a signed listing agreement with that start date. And now, and we're going to talk about this more in a little bit, if that listing is, excuse me, excluded from MLS, you cannot advertise it at all. And like I said, we'll talk about that more in a little bit. But I would say that's biggest thing, and also including the firm name in any advertising that you're doing. So advertising with the firm name, these are just 2 kind of examples. A lot of agents with our office have their own logo, which is great. That's what's so great about KW, is that you have the ability to advertise yourself as the agent versus, hey, I'm just a little person in this firm. You are the face of your advertising. However, we still have to comply with Wisconsin advertising rules where we have to include the firm name. So both of these are permissible. You can see the one on the left just says Keller Williams. The one on the right says Keller Williams as well, but we do have the North Shore logo as well. You can see in Jay Schmidt's advertising, he has the North Shore logo. So either of those work. If you're not doing print advertising, as far as like logos, just ensure you have that, you know, Carla Florence of Keller Williams Realty. Just including that KW is so important. Essentially, the consumer must be able to easily discern what firm you work with when you're advertising. So with social media, so sometimes when you're doing, like, if you use Twitter or, you know, even if you're just advertising on your Facebook business page, your Instagram page, maybe it's not always easy to put the full firm name in your, for example, in your Instagram handle. Maybe it doesn't say the full firm name, but so it's not always practical, and they recognize that. So they say that those displays are exempt from the disclosure requirement, but only when linked to a display that includes all required disclosures. So let's say you're advertising a listing on your social media page. As long as the link to that listing goes to a page that includes, like if it goes to then your website, and then your website acknowledges that you're with Keller Williams, then you're okay. I would say do your best though to avoid that, you know, buyers having to take that extra step to understand what firm you're with. So if you do have a Facebook page, a business page, it should be Kimmy Herbert Real Estate with Keller Williams. So including that firm name in your business page name, or if you can do that with your Instagram business page, do that as well. Or even when you're maybe in your description, if you're advertising a property and you're putting pictures up that take a look at this amazing property listed by Kimmy Herbert of Keller Williams Realty. Again, if you can include that in the advertising and social media, great. If not, there is this kind of workaround where again, the link would display the required disclosures. Attributing the source. So kind of shifting gears here a little bit. Agents can be found liable to a buyer for inaccurate statements made by the broker that appear to the buyer to have been made from the broker's own personal knowledge. So we're talking about like square footage, any kind of like property, any kind of description you're making of the property in MLS. There is a clause in I think it's the buyer agency agreement that kind of buyers, if the buyer is signing that agency agreement, they're acknowledging that brokers aren't held liable. However, there's always lawsuits that come up, and then, you know, these things come into question. So to protect yourself further, and again, this is in our KW disclosure as well, but always best to protect yourself as much as possible. So consider some general disclaimers on your advertising. So for example, in MLS, you can make these statements to avoid the presumption that all the statements made by you have been verified and are personally known to be true. So many agents will include this, this statement in their MLS private remarks, or even public remarks. Room sizes and square footage are not verified by broker. So most buyers agents are making buyers aware of that, but again, better to protect yourself as best as you can. Also, if you have a seller who maybe has like a whole list of improvements that you're you know, including in packets at the property that buyers can take and they can use this information, acknowledging on that seller update list that this information is from the seller, right? So I had a sheet like this, and the title would always say list of updates, and then kind of an asterisk below, like per seller, that all this information is coming from the seller. It's not verified by the broker. Photographs. So reminder that photographs are subject to copyright law. You must get permission from the owner of the photographs to use those for advertising. So if you're hiring a photographer to take pictures of your listing and then they're giving you those photographs, you have permission. That I don't think any photographer is not giving agents that permission to use those photos. That's kind of what you're paying them for, right? But I think the common thing that if you are, let's say, the buyer's agent on a property and the property has sold, and then you want to go and advertise, hey, I sold this property, you can't go take the picture, the listing photo from MLS that the listing agent paid for and use that for your advertising. That listing agent it's copyrighted, they own those photos. So you would need to get permission from the listing agent to use that photograph. So best thing to do would be just to take your own photo if you want to advertise the property that you've sold. Same thing with like social media. You know, if you're advertising another agent's listing, always good to get permission from them first. If you're advertising other KW listings, I can't imagine an agent's going to say, no, you can't use those photos to advertise my listing, but always better to get permission. So with that, advertising other firms' listings. So this would be if you wanted to advertise a Shore West agent's listing, you have to get the permission from that firm. And you also must clearly indicate that you are not the listing agent. So an example of, you know, when an agent would need to get this permission, one of our agents, Jonathan Newby, he used to do this like real estate crush of the week, and he would use a lot of KW listings, but other times he would use agents from other firms. So he had to be sure he was getting permission from those agents to advertise those listings. And again, most agents are going to be okay with that as long as you're acknowledging that you are not the listing agent and you're kind of attributing who the listing agent is. I would totally be fine with it. It's free advertising, right? And the other piece with advertising listings, the Internet Data Exchange, which is called the IDX. This is all affiliated with our MLS. So if you're running a website that's not through Command, you need to be sure you're complying with the IDX rules. So if you are thinking about or you already have created your own website, there are a lot of other like platforms that you can purchase and build your own website. Please let me know, because we need to be sure that you're following the IDX rules, and there's paperwork we need to fill out with MLS, and there's a cost to it. But if you're just using KW Command, no need to worry. That website it does comply with the IDX rules. So we kind of have like a blanket agreement with the entire firm for our Command website. So that's on IDX feeds. All right, the other thing to be cognizant of with advertising is our do not call list. So this would apply if you are looking to advertise, and by advertise, I really mean like calling or texting, any kind of telephone solicitation to expireds, FSBOs, because some agents use that as their lead generation strategy. So if you are looking into doing this or are already doing it, you need to be sure that you're registered with both the National Do Not Call Registry and the State of Wisconsin Telephone Solicitor Registration. So again, this is if you're making cold calls to for sale by owners, sellers, expired listings in order to solicit any brokerage services. If you're working with a buyer and you see a for sale by owner property listed, you have every right to contact that owner and let them know, hey, I've got a buyer for your listing. This would be if you are calling them specifically to solicit them for, let me list your home. And we have had a few agents in the past be reported for this because they weren't registered and they weren't verifying that sellers were not on the do not call list. So it's kind of a big deal. So let me know if, again, just contact me if you have any specific questions on the do not call list. If you are advertising, especially if you're advertising to like specific neighborhoods, kind of soliciting business, again, with flyers or mailers, this is just an example of what you can put on your letterhead, kind of at the bottom of your flyer or your mailer. So it states that each office is independently owned and operated. If you have a brokerage relationship with another agency, this is not intended as a solicitation. So again, this is just an example. You could easily create this, on your own using our KW logo and just printing this at the bottom. But it's not required to use this if you have a brokerage relationship with another agency, not intended as a solicitation, but I would recommend it. It certainly can't hurt. All right, moving into MLS. So this is a big thing I want to hit on, and actually I'm going to be hitting on it tomorrow during team meeting because a lot of agents received a number of fines this last month. So I really want to be sure you guys are understanding what MLS rules are, where to find them, so that you don't get subjected to a fine. Biggest thing is listings must be submitted to MLS within 48 hours of the start term date. So that start term date is that line 311 of the listing contract that states so in this case, the April 4th is the start term date of the contract. If you don't submit your listing within 48 hours, you'll receive a fine of $100 per day. We had a agent who had some unfortunate circumstances come their way and they forgot to enter the listing into MLS and they received a $1,700 fine because it was so long. And again, it's just $100 per day and that just accumulates over time. And so once they finally get it into MLS, then the $100 a day stops. But so if you are late, let's say you're on day 3 and you still forgot to enter the listing or the seller just wasn't ready, you need to amend this start term date so that it's later. The start term date is what triggers your ability to publicly market or advertise the property. So I could get a listing contract signed today, which is July 13th, and I could say, okay, this listing isn't going to start until July 20th. The start term date is July 20th. If that's the case, then I just can't do any advertising. I can't put up a yard sign. I can't put out anything on social media. I can't send out any flyers. I can't put it in MLS until July 20th. So this date is so important to pay attention to. Any questions on that?
Yes, Kimmy.
Yeah.
I've got a question. Can you advertise coming soon? Like
No.
say you have a Facebook page and just say coming soon?
Nope. You cannot do advertising of any kind until this start date. So if your start date is April 4th, you cannot put it on your Facebook page as coming soon until April 4th. And really then it would only be coming soon if it was entered as a delayed listing. So if it's a delayed listing, again, it's not starting until, let's say, April 4th, but then it's going into MLS on April 4th as a delayed listing. And then at that time, then you can start advertising, this property is in delayed. It will be coming live on April 10th, whatever date that you and your seller determine to be your live date.
Oh, okay. So only if it's so only if you submit it as in delayed.
Correct.
That's what, okay. All right.
Yep. So this date here, this start date, whether the listing is an active listing in MLS right away, meaning you're putting it in MLS and then it's going active and right away, so showings are beginning right away, or if it's delayed, this date is still the start date.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So with delayed status, so delayed status is simply the seller and the agent determining that there are going to be no showings for a limited time period due to the sellers preparing the property for future showings. That's how it's handled in most cases. Sometimes delayed status is used, the seller may be ready for showings for the most part, but it is kind of a nice like teaser, coming soon teaser for buyers. So it also just kind of helps. Some agents have a very like strict kind of marketing plan. Like we always go active on a Thursday, and then we do a Thursday twilight open house, and then we do another open house on Saturday and Sunday. So if your seller is ready to sign the listing contract on a Monday, but you want to stick to your kind of marketing plan of, okay, we don't want showings to start until Thursday, then we can sign this listing contract on Monday with the start term date of that Monday. That would allow me as the agent to put it in MLS and start marketing it. And start creating a little bit of buzz, but then knowing that showings are not going to begin until that Thursday. The seller has to consent to this. So there is a delayed status form that they will sign. And the use of the delayed status shall be for a period of time not greater than 21 days. So this is the delayed status form. I'm going to show you where you can find that. So this is a listing in MLS in zip form that I created. And again, I used that listing template when I created the listing. And then, let me back up one step here. So when I create the template for a listing, this is what you're gonna see. And then you'll see this folder of additional forms, title MLS miscellaneous. So if I open that, I'll see some additional forms, including the MLS authorization to delay showings form. And so this you would just send with your listing contract. Basically states that, says, while most sellers want rapid exposure of their home in order to encourage all possible buyers, the purpose of using the delayed status in a multiple listing service is to give sellers time to prepare their home for sale prior to showings beginning on the property. During the time a listing is in delayed status, agents may advertise and market the listing in a manner consistent with their marketing strategy. Maximum of 21 days. Listings entered as delayed are searchable by members of the MLS and can be manually emailed to the potential buyers. Showings of any kind are not allowed during delayed status. This includes showing to members of the public, agents, and brokers. Days on market begin the first day that the listing goes active. And once a listing goes active in the system, the expectation is that it is available at that time for showings. So seller and you as the agent need to determine what that start showing date is. And if you, let's say the listing starts today, July 13th, we're gonna make this go live on Saturday, the 18th, because my sellers just we need to do photographs and we need to do a few like staging things. Let's say on Thursday, my sellers say, hey, we're ready. Like, can we go on the market today? You won't be able to. This is the date, and that's the set date. It cannot be changed. The only grace period that they do allow is they do allow you to extend it a few days sometimes if you reach out to MLS. I know they were allowing that for a period of time. So if you have a start showing date at the 18th and your seller says, oh my God, we're not ready, we need a few more days. Typically, if you call MLS, they will, I believe, extend it a few days, but they won't do anything longer than 21 days. So, and then seller and you as a listing agent would need to sign this. And then this gets uploaded along with the listing contract into the documents section of MLS. All right, now we'll talk about excluded listings. So an excluded listing is when the seller does not want the property listed in MLS. The only permissible intended purpose of a seller excluding a property from MLS is to allow privacy and provide additional confidentiality. There is no public marketing of any kind for excluded listings. That means you can't put up a yard sign. You can't send out mailers. You can't do any kind of social media. Really, the only thing you can do is get on the phone and call agents that you know of in the area, whether they're from KW or not, and you can let them know that, hey, I've got this excluded listing. Do you have any buyers that would be interested? Because again, the intent is privacy for the seller. So if the seller wants privacy, then no marketing of any kind is allowed. So in the marketing section of the listing contract, you would need to reflect that. You know, you're not going to list here like you normally would in a regular listing contract. You're not going to state that marketing includes MLS. It doesn't include yard sign or mailers or social media. None of that would be included. You know, like I said, the marketing, really, there is no marketing. So this would really probably just be left blank unless the seller kind of wanted to distinguish how you're going to be reaching out to certain agents. If a seller does wish to exclude a property from MLS, then you have to email a copy of the listing contract and this authorization to exclude listing form to the MLS within 48 hours. So is there still that 48-hour requirement to submit your contracts, but you're not uploading it into MLS directly, you're emailing it to, their email is admin@metromls.com, and it's on the second page of this. I don't have the second page here, but it's on this form if you forget. There is a $50 charge to exclude a listing from MLS. They will credit you back $20 if it does sell and you report the data, the sold data, to MLS. And then the other piece is you have to notify MLS through email or by calling them of any changes to the excluded status of the listing. So if it expires, you need to let them know, hey, this property is no longer excluded from MLS. Or again, if it sells, if it closes, then you need to report that data to MLS. Any questions on excluded? Not many people are using it anymore because of the new rules. So, and then they did extend the delayed status period. So more agents are just putting it in delayed status longer to give seller that, 2-3 week time period to prep the property for sale. All right, one party listings and for sale by owner. So if you do a one party listing, which is, I have a listing contract for a specific buyer, which one party listings don't typically get advertised in MLS because the seller already found the buyer and they're doing the transaction. And again, or for sale by owner transactions, you are required to report these to the MLS. So if you are a part of a one party listing, or you help a buyer complete a transaction with a for sale by owner seller, you need to report it to MLS. So for a one party listing, you would submit the required paperwork as you would with a new listing, including a photo after it closes. So you would enter in, hey, like I've got a new listing, uploading the listing contract. That's all you need is just the listing contract. And then after the listing is entered, you make it go active right away, and then you immediately change it to sold status. And then in the private remarks, you just make a comment of this is a single party listing, and that's all you need to say. For sale by owner deals, you as the buyer's agent, you would still enter it into the listing into the system, but you would put in public remarks that it's a for sale by owner. You'd upload one photo and the buyer agency agreement. So instead of the listing contract, because there is no listing contract, you're uploading the buyer agency agreement. And then after uploading and making that listing, quote unquote, it's not really a listing, but after you make it active, again, flip it to sold right away, call MLS or email MLS and let them know, hey, this was a for sale by owner. And then they will go in and change the listing agent name to state non-MLS. So again, this is just for data purposes for MLS, but also for you as the agent. So you have those numbers following you. Any questions on that? All right. Accepted offers. Accepted offers must be reported within 48 hours as either active with offer, which means they have an offer, but the seller is still allowing showings of the property and is taking secondary offers, or pending. So pending is just another status that you can change the property to. Pending means they have an offer and the seller is no longer showing the property. The only time you don't need to change the status of the listing is if there is a bump clause. And I need to change this slide because the bump clause is now separate from the home sale contingency. So theoretically, you could have a bump clause without a home sale. But anyway, if there is a bump clause in the offer to purchase, you do not need to change the status. You can still market the property in MLS as if appearing like there is no accepted offer. Otherwise, you must change the status within 48 hours of acceptance. Failure to report accepted offers can result in a $10 per day sanction. And then just a note that short sale properties, you have to mark those as accepted offer at the time the seller accepts the offer, even if the bank hasn't approved the offer yet. So if you're ever listing a short sale property. And then this is my last slide here. So I just want to quickly kind of go through what are the different statuses and what do they mean? So obviously, new active listing means that it's available to agents and the broker members of the MLS. Available meaning that the listing can be actively shown and actively receive offers. If your listing can't be, if its listing is active and the seller's like, I just can't show it this week for whatever reason, it would need to be put into withdrawn. So kind of down to the bottom, withdrawn listing is if a seller no longer wants you to market their property, but you still have that active listing agreement, it would be in withdrawn. And so while in withdrawn, it's not available for anyone to show, essentially what it means. And then once they're ready to go back into active, then you can flip it back to active. Again, with delayed, the seller and the realtor desire no showings for a time period due to the seller's preparing the property for future showings. While the property is in delayed, the property cannot be shown to anybody. And it says the ability to submit offers are not being offered to cooperating agents and brokers. Property may not be delayed longer than 21 days. This is kind of an interesting one because with this crazy market we've been in, a lot of people putting their homes in delayed like they usually do, but buyers are so desperate, they are writing offer sight unseen. So they're saying, okay, I understand I can't see the property. I'm not allowed to go in, but I want this house so bad, I'm just gonna write an offer without seeing it. And I mean, agents have a duty to present those offers. So some listings are getting accepted, having accepted offers while in delayed status. If you're ever in this situation, don't be afraid to reach out to me and talk it through. But there's not much MLS can do about it because there's not much we can do about it. Again, if the buyer wants to write their offer sight unseen and the seller wants to accept that offer sight unseen, okay, they've come to a mutual agreement. But the delayed status rule still applies that the property can't be shown during the delayed period, nor can the property be switched to active earlier. So that buyer is going to have to wait to, let's say they get their offer accepted, they still have to wait to see the property until the property is active in MLS. Active with offer, so that's when you see the little C in the in MLS. The C means that there's contingencies in the offer, so it's under contract with contingencies. And so typically when there's still those contingencies, the listing agent and the seller are still willing to show the property and accept secondary offers. And so when it's indicated as active with offer, the listings continue to appear in active searches. If a seller has accepted an offer and maybe that offer has no contingencies, or maybe they just don't want to show the property anymore and don't really want it to market as an active listing, move it into pending, and it would mean that the listing broker is not required to continue showings, and the seller is not, maybe it's kind of a way to say we're not really taking any secondary offers at this time. It'll ask you for a pending date. That's the date that the offer was accepted. I would say typically the way the statuses are changed is initially when seller goes under contract with a buyer, you flip it to active with offer, that contingent button. And then once all the contingencies have been satisfied, so typically, after the buyer delivers loan commitment, which is typically the last contingency, then the property gets moved into pending, and it's just kind of like, okay, we're just awaiting closing at this time. That's typically how things are switched over. When you see listings as expired, this means the listing contract has been canceled by an amendment before the expiration date, or it just didn't sell, the listing expired. We talked about withdrawn, and then obviously a sold listing. So the property is sold and closed. You have to notify MLS or switch it to sold within 10 days of closing, or there may be additional sanctions levied for that. Any questions on that? That's my last slide for you guys. I don't have any questions.
Kimmy, Kimmy, I have a question.
Yeah.
The active with offer, those are the ones that can still be shown and they're still listed as, it's got the contingency. Is there a time period of how long they can be in that state? Or, I mean, I'm assuming that with those, I can call the agent and say, hey, are you still accepting, are you still taking offers? Or
yeah, no, there's no time frame. Is there like a limit on how long they can be in active with offer? It's however long it's in that state, right? So it could essentially be active with offer until the closing date.
okay.
That
Okay.
makes-
Yeah. No,
Okay.
It makes total sense. Okay.
If you are on the listing, so let's say you have a listing contract that starts, let's say it expires July 20th, and you have an accepted offer, and it doesn't close until July 30th. So from a listing contract perspective, you don't need to amend your listing contract end date. You've already procured the buyer. So if that listing contract expires before the closing date, not an issue. The only thing that will happen is in MLS, the listing will automatically expire unless you're in pending status. So if it's in pending status, nothing will happen to the listing. But if it's an active with offer status, it will automatically expire if the expiration date isn't changed. So that's just something to keep in mind. A lot of agents just, protect themselves, and just to be clear with the seller, they'll amend the listing contract, the expiration date, to be that closing date or beyond the closing date, just to avoid any confusion. But like I said, just something to be cognizant of. The last thing I just did want to show you guys is where to find all this information in MLS. So I'm in metromls.com, and under the resource tab, there's this rules and procedures link. So this is where you can find all of these rules. So this is the MLS procedures, just talking about adding a listing, kind of when you're adding that listing, what do each of these things mean? The compensation to sub-agent, buyer's agent, bonus to broker, broker owned, what do all these things mean? Variable rate commission. because they will fine you if these pieces are not completed correctly in MLS. And they're typically small fines, like $5, but they can really add up. So we had an agent get a $5 fine for missing this, what was it? It was named prospect. So named prospects, meaning there's protected buyers from a previous listing agreement, or there's exceptions to the listing contract. So there's that part of the listing contract where the seller can say, so-and-so buyer is excluded from this listing contract for a certain period of time. That would mean there's named prospects. So you have to indicate yes to that. So MLS has your listing contract and they're seeing this information on there. So if you don't properly indicate that information in your MLS data sheet, or when you're entering listing information, they're gonna fine you for it. And they don't always give you a warning. Usually they don't for little fines like that. Same thing with like property address is a big one, with the address using the correct abbreviation. If you don't use the correct abbreviation, they'll give you a $5 fine. So make sure that you are paying attention to this to avoid any minor fines. Talks about reporting a listing, how to go about that, a whole section of delayed listing, a whole section of excluded listing, one-party listings, lot of information in here and as well in the rules manual. So encourage you to take a look at this if you've never looked at this before. Yeah. Any other questions? Any questions? Yeah.
Kimmy, I'm not sure that it switched over from the slides to the MLS website when you were just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Just to let everybody know.
Let me back up here. Are you seeing the website now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. So again, metromls.com, under their resources tab, this rules and procedures link. So this is where I pulled the different manuals. So it looks like that. And this is also where you can find, so the forms and profile sheets. We do have the delayed status. So you probably didn't, I wonder if you didn't, did you see this before when I shared my screen? I'm in zip form here. Oops, went too far back. So under the documents tab, when you create a listing and apply one of our listing templates, let me refresh this here. And the MLS forms, the excluded and the delayed form will pop into a miscellaneous folder. But if you ever forget or just are looking for them in another place, they can be found in under the resources tab, under forms and profile sheets. Here's the exclusion form right here. And the delayed form, here it is, under listing forms. So just good to know where all this is. Awesome. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. And nobody has any other questions? Wonderful. Thanks for joining me. Be compliant. Don't get fines.
Thank you, Kimmy.
Yeah.
Thank you.